Hello, Berlin. It's good to see you guys. It's good to be here. I'd like to start with a huge thanks to the conference organizers for this beautiful event and really nice space that I'm speaking in today. And especially to Jan over there who nudged me to apply to speak at this because I probably wouldn't have otherwise. And I also wouldn't be experiencing this really warm and friendly community that you all are. It's really lovely. Secondly, I've got quite a lot of material to run through, so I don't think we'll have time for Q&A. And even if we did, I realize that I'm one of the last things that's standing between you and a cold beer. So I'll be standing right up here at the stage at 7 p.m. after the final talk is done, if you want to come up and say hi. Right, so my name is Hannah Donovan, or @Han on the internet. That's another way you can ask me questions. And I'm based in London, where everybody looks like this, obviously. And I'm what I call a full-stack designer. So I do everything from UX and user research through to interactions and interfaces, and then graphic design and icons and some CSS, that kind of thing. And I combine all of these skills together daily to make products. And I mainly make products in the digital music space. So you may know me from some serious things, like Last.fm, where I helped shape the product early on and led design there. Or you may know me from some not-so-serious things, like Drinkify. This was sort of an accidental hack day success. If you haven't tried it out, be careful. It might kill you with the quantities. And lastly, my current project, This Is My Jam, where I'm co-founder and design director. So if you don't know about This Is My Jam, it's a place to put your favorite song right now. And it's not just any song, it's like the song that you can't get out of your head right now, the one that you've got on repeat on your phone, and you only get one. You can put it on your profile, and you can sort of change up your profile, customize it to really tell the world how you feel about this particular piece of music. And what you get is a playlist of songs from your friends, and it's sort of like this ever-changing, hand-picked radio station by people whose music taste you trust. And it's a slow music service. We don't really encourage you to post that often, which is kind of an unusual thing, I suppose. We focus on the quality rather than the quantity of the posting. But despite all that, we just recently had 1.3 million jams posted, which is pretty cool. So I'm excited to share that with you. Music and design are my passion and my life's work. Other highly important things that you might want to know about me. I recently purchased a reindeer pelt. I'm not joking. It's the softest thing that I've ever touched, and I wrote most of this talk sitting on it. I play orchestra with a real orchestra here. We play music like that. We rehearse in spaces that look like that. And I also play with a comedy orchestra, which plays music like that, and our rehearsal spaces look like this. And my favorite film is Monsters, Inc. I'm about 6 years old up here, so just keep that in mind during the course of this presentation today, okay? And my favorite image on the internet, are you guys ready for this? My absolute favorite image, makes me laugh every time, is these guys. I'm modeling all my haircuts on them. I'm working on the one on the top right now, I think. Right, OK, let's get down to business. So today, in case you didn't read the blurb on the site or whatever, I'm mostly going to be talking about feels. Yeah, let's just get this out right away at the beginning of this presentation. So if you want to run for the door now is your chance, OK? In 2011, I quit my job at Last.fm, and I was sort of clinging to what was left of my ability to make things, which at the time was not a whole hell of a lot, OK? And since then, I've been working on this as a design problem. As makers, burnout is something that we all face. It's not a very nice thing. It might be big, it might be small. Mine was pretty big, yeah. And that's the story that I'm going to tell you about today. So let's get started. All right, well, back up to 1999. So I went to design school. It's kind of like art school. It was a very traditional graphic design sort of focused thing. Did a lot of art classes as well. I fell in love with the web while I was there. You guys can probably guess the rest of that story. And like art school Al says, there was a lot of this going on there, definitely. But there were also some other things that I learned that was sort of the beginning of a lifetime of learning about the things that I'm going to address today, like the value of good critique, or creative block, or things like this, like what's required to make good work. And I graduated, which was cool, and I got my first design job, which was great. I think much to my parents' surprise, I wasn't doing that. And I got an even better design job in a better city, so that was cool. And then I got like a super awesome design job in a really awesome city, and that was great too. I felt like I was sort of living the dream. And then, wait a minute, that's not how it's supposed to go, right? This is not the right trajectory for that graph. But I was totally burnt out. Completely broken, depressed, frustrated, exhausted. I couldn't even pick up a pencil and sketch anything. So, like you do, I left my job in February of that year and packed a suitcase and ran away from it all. Right, so 2 months later, I'm somewhere in Hong Kong. I'm still pretty miserable at this point. I thought I might never be able to design anything ever again. I thought maybe I'd completely forgotten how. Whatever tap of creativity I used to just be able to turn on and things would come out of it, now, like, wouldn't even drip. And this tap of creativity is also the only way that I have to make a living, too, right? So, huge problem there. And then I get this text from my longtime friend and colleague, Matthew Ogle, and he's sort of like, hey, I know you're off the grid and like running around the world and like, where are you? But I'm really desperate for a designer. Could you please help me with something on this project? And I thought about it for a bit, and then I texted him back, yes. And it was in that moment when I did this that I realized that this is the commitment to a creative life. No matter how fucked you might be, there is only one way out, and that way out is to keep making. So enough of me. Why does this matter to you guys? Well, first of all, it's because of this. How many people here have dealt with something similar, maybe on a less drastic scale, okay? Just raise your hand. Okay, so that's like almost half of you. And, you know, if it hasn't happened to you yet, there's a very good chance that it might. So this is a real issue, guys. We all make our money this way, right? And you know, there's ways to get around this. You're probably familiar with some of these ways. There's ways like this, and you know, that. And I like those things. Those things are cool, don't get me wrong, but they're not super effective in the long term. And that's what I want to talk about a bit more. And you'd also think that like the most important thing is that we all understand and are able to take care of what keeps us creative, right? But from my conversations with peers in the tech community, I'm not totally convinced that that actually happens. For instance, if you did a CS degree, you might not have even had that sort of like first brush with like the personal creativity blah that I was forced to have to deal with in design school, you know, early on. And that's crazy, because it doesn't matter what you call yourself or what tools you make things with or how you make them. What matters is that we're all makers and that we all need to take care of this. And because we don't talk about this problem, it's really self-reinforcing. Especially in the startup community, I find that we really focus on tools. We talk about the efficiency of things. It's all like lean this and minimum viable blah that, and we treat ourselves like a tool that can be optimized for even higher performance. We separate the making from the maker. How's the company doing, we ask each other. Well, the company will be doing fine if people are making things, and people will only be making things if they're in a space where they feel like they can make good things, right? As a quick aside, I think it's really interesting that recently people have been talking about failure a lot in the tech community, but I think it's really only the tip of the iceberg in sort of talking about people, and I hope that as a community we dig deeper there, but, you know, it's hard because of this, right? So hopefully we can, because we need to learn from each other. Phew, all right, I think it's like time for a little owl break. That was a lot so far. Yep, this is Do you guys like owls? I love owls. There's so many, you love owls too. There's so many fascinating things about owls. Like, did you know that they can basically like hear with their face? It's amazing. It's super cool. Hit me up for more owl facts afterwards. So that's my hungover owl. This is definitely what I'm gonna look like tomorrow morning. I don't know about you guys. Okay, let's get back to business. So we're in Hong Kong, it's 2011. I feel really shitty. How do I dig myself out of this big hole, right? 2.5 years later, these are some of the methods that worked for me to overcome my maker's block and have continued to work for me, actually. So what works for me might not work for you. This is not some kind of like 5-step self-help guide, oh God, but an opportunity for you to add something to your toolkit if you think it might be useful. Right, so the first thing here is learning when to stop. We come from a world of things that don't have an end. Instead of like the physical end to a record when the music stops playing, we have like a pause button on our phones. And we craft digital things where we can sort of tweak and update and revert as often as we would like to. And I think the lesson here is that it's much easier to learn where the end of something is actually if you work with physical stuff. Early on in one of my first painting classes in uni, I remember, really harshly learning this horrible lesson about overpainting, which is basically when the painting was better yesterday night than it is today, and now you have to throw it out and start a whole new one and finish it at exactly the same point before your critique tomorrow. It's not a good place to be in. In coding, this manifests itself as over-optimizing or over-architecting. And it's applicable whether you're working on like a really small part of a system, just one tiny feature, or the big picture, right? And I had to learn the hard way in the big picture category when to stop working at Last.fm because I was still tweaking things that really didn't need to be tweaked anymore. But the other reason that this is really important is I think that you need to finish working on things to allow other ideas to come in. So my 6-year-old brain, it's like a small box, and I can like put one idea in one side, and then it rattles around in there for a while, but then I have to like push it out the other side to make space for more ideas to come in. Otherwise, it just all gets blocked up, and there's no more space for new inputs. And we need new inputs to keep making new things. That's what keeps this cycle virtuous and keep going. Secondly, start with something shit. Yep. When we feel like we can't make things, we're on a very steep and slippery slide to feeling like everything we make is shit. I'm sure you've been there at least once before in your life. And worrying about it being shit is even harder at the very beginning of a project, because at the beginning of a project, we have this extra barrier to overcome, which is like, oh my God, I'm staring at a blank canvas. How am I ever going to make something out of this? Or staring at a blank, whatever. In fact, I hate this feeling so much that to this day, I do something that I call ruining my sketchbooks, which is like when I get a brand new sketchbook, I'm just like too afraid to start making something in there because it's all pristine and looks so nice, and how could I ever possibly fill it up with great stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So I take the first page, and I always write book of sketch and like really sloppy writing and just like doodle something stupid in there, and then flip the page over, and then on the next page, I get down to business, and it's all fine after that. But I sort of ruin it first to like lower the bar for myself so that I can get it done. So don't worry about making something shit, because the first thing that you make, it probably will be shit. It's just about getting that thing out faster, making that stupid doodle in like 5 seconds, so that you can get on to iterating something good out of that. And there's so many good examples of this. Anne Lamott, who wrote Bird by Bird, which is a really great book on writing, she calls upon writers to write shitty first drafts. That's what she calls it. And Fred Brooks, the author of The Mythical Man Month, whom I'm sure you have heard of, says about first systems, plan to throw one away, because you will anyway. In fact, since I'm just up here sort of like exposing all these really embarrassing things to you, I'm going to show you the very first version of Jam I mean, like, this is really, really bad. You know, this was just sort of like one of my first sketches of it, but it stuck a couple of things together. You know, we knew we wanted the jam itself to be really big, which is something that, like, at the time, no one on the internet was really doing. Like, a song was always like a little row or a little button. It wasn't like a big thing. We knew we wanted like some space for you know, some writing about it. And today, it looks like this. And I look at this and I still see a lot of imperfections with it, of course, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was at the beginning. It's just about getting that shitty first thing done really quickly and getting it over with. Third here, taking that small first step, making the shit prototype, will actually help motivate you do more. And I think there's this big common misconception about making things, that it's like some kind of magical process where like a lightning bolt comes down and like hits you and your head explodes and you've got this amazing idea all of a sudden. In fact, I often experience this when people ask me, oh, how did you and Matt come up with the idea for This Is My Jam? Tell me all about it. And I'm like, oh, well, you know, it was like 5 years of really hard work, working together very closely, you know, working on social music and the internet and understanding the whole crazy ecosystem of like rights and labels, and their eyes glaze over, right? And they're like, wait, what? It wasn't just like you woke up one morning and you had this brilliant idea. That's what they always want me to tell them, right? And I'm like, no, it's not how it works. First, you have to take an action, and then from that, you're motivated, and then something happens, you know? You need to let the sky get dark and stormy and interesting first before there's a lightning bolt. A related concept to this is one that Julia Cameron talks about in her book, The Artist's Way, which is that we are like, you know, like sharks that need to keep swimming to stay alive. We sort of need to keep making things to stay true to ourselves, to our integrity. And it really doesn't matter, I don't think, how small or insignificant that thing is that you make, as long as you keep making it. So when I felt like I couldn't design anything, what I did is I actually started making a garden, and this is what it looks like. I grew some plants. It actually turned out pretty well in the end. It wasn't a bad garden. You know, and this felt a little bit similar to design for me because it was kind of creative, it's kind of technical. You make things grow, right? I mean, sure, it's like a totally crazy old lady habit, you know, it's bonkers, but whatever. It was like something that just helped the creative shark inside of me, you know, feel satisfied, and it helped me see the light at the end of the tunnel. Right, this is kind of a big one. I want to talk about habits for a bit. So, rightly so, our industry places a lot of importance on habits for getting things done, processes, you know, sort of state-of-the-art stuff. A good example of this is agile, right? Helps you get things done. And then there's like a second kind of habit, too, that's really important. Twyla Tharp talks about this in her book, The Creative Habit. She's a choreographer. She talks about the importance of personal habits to keep yourself sort of sharp and ready to be able to make things. So for her, this is like getting up super early in the morning and this ritual of like hailing a cab in Manhattan and going to the gym where she does this insane workout routine, because that's how she keeps herself ready. For us, it might be something like, you know, reading a blog every day that or whatever, something to keep our knowledge up to date, right? But there's a third and more elusive habit that I need to tell you guys about. This habit is the one of creating patterns for personal serendipity, because making things requires unusual inputs. We need the unexpected in our life, and that means making space for the unexpected to happen, which is difficult when we're following routines and sort of doing things daily. So an example of this is this year, actually. Team Jam and a few people rather, from our co-working space hired this house in Spain, just south of Barcelona. It was really cheap because we got it right before the tourist season started. Nice 6-bedroom house. And we went there and did a bunch of work. And it was amazing. We got so much done. Like, we had all these really incredible ideas. It was just a wonderful experience. And we were all like, how did this happen? And I really think it was just down to the fact that it was an unusual environment. There were different inputs. We had to think of things differently. It really helped us get things done. But it doesn't even need to be that extravagant. In fact, it can be really small and simple and cheap. Another example of this is I use 750 words every day to journal, and that's a way for me to write down things unexpectedly, tidbits of ideas, whatever. It's just like stuff, but it's giving myself the space and time for that unexpected to happen. I sometimes think of this, there's this Tom Waits interview that I saw once on video. It's really, really good. And he talks about, like, someone asked him, like, how do you write songs? And he talks about the songs as, like, because, you know, he's crazy, like butterflies, and he's got a butterfly net, and he has to, like, catch the songs, right? But there's an element of truth to that, which is, like, without the butterfly net in the first place, you know, you don't even know if you're going to, don't even know if you might be able to catch it. And that's what sort of creating these patterns for personal serendipity is all about. It's kind of a, you know, it feels like a funny thing to do because you don't know if that serendipity is going to happen. You don't know if you're going to be able to catch a butterfly, but without even creating the space to do that in the first place, you're never going to get one, right? Another silly thing I do is, another free, silly thing I do, I can't believe I'm telling you guys this, why did I write this talk, is sometimes I walk around the neighborhood and I look at moss, and I like textures a lot, so I like touching the moss, and occasionally I steal it and take it home to my garden. Yep. Okay, we're on the fifth one. I don't know how we're doing on time. There's no timer up here. I hope we're all right. Okay, I'm just going to keep on going. By far, the most important technique is to do something different. This really helps me get unstuck. So one of my old painting teachers used to say that, that he would always have two canvases going at the same time, usually one in oils and one in acrylics, and he'd like paint on one, and whenever he got stuck and it's like, ah, this isn't working, he'd just like turn his stool around and he'd paint on the other canvas until he realized, oh, that's how I need to solve this one, then he'd flip back around again and work on this canvas. And having something else like that to help you get unstuck, I find really, really cool. It works really well. It's about taking the skills you have in one category and just sort of shifting them a little bit. So try working in a different medium or a different paradigm or a different idiom or language. So even through this entire period, while I was actually working full-time as an interaction designer, what I decided to do was take on a bunch of side projects of print work for friends. This was something that I hadn't done in like 7 years. Print work, it's like a completely different sort of technical skill. But I think it was really these side projects that helped me turn my creative tap back on. These side projects with a deadline, especially, are a really great way to sort of fake it until you make it. And I'm quite happy to say that I'm not taking on any more side projects because I now have so many ideas of my own that I want to execute. I don't have time to be working on stuff for other people. I actually haven't shown these to many people yet, so I thought, you know, like, I'd show them to you guys. Like, why not? I mean, I might as well say this is what I did. So I made these like silly cards for Matthew Ogle when he left Last.fm. They had like drawings of the web team members on them. They were planning poker cards for Scrum. And I collaborated with Jamie McKelvey on a backup for an issue of Iron Man. I did all of the infographics. This is sort of like Tony Stark's post-human understanding of the world because he can do that kind of stuff. We also collaborated together on an album for Art Brut, where Jamie did the illustrations and I did all of the design and the layout. That year also, my grandmother turned 80 years old, so my sisters and I decided to make a cookbook of all of her recipes, because she's an amazing cook. And this included like photographing everything, like making it, photographing everything, making these illustrations, and all sorts of stuff for that. It was a pretty fun project. We made it into like a hardback, really beautiful object. I did some identity design for a friend of mine who runs a speakeasy called the Manhattans Project. That orchestra that I was telling you about that I play with, I redesigned their logo for them this year because it was their 50th anniversary. Why not? Cool, thanks. And more recently, actually, I just finished working on the logo for a brand new comic that's coming out. It's going to be out next month, actually, called 3, which is written by Kieran Gillen, if you're into that kind of stuff, and it's about Sparta. So once you find your methods that work for you, because these are my methods, they might not work for you, it's really important that you codify them. You need to work them into your life so that this doesn't happen again. And you also need to talk about them with your colleagues, too. This will help each other critique the methods behind your work, not just the work itself. And I think especially, if some of your methods are a little bit quirky, like you like to go pick moss out of people's yards or whatever, or different to other people in your workspace, like you need 15 minutes at the beginning of each day to write your journal or whatever, then talk to your colleagues about them so that they understand that these quirky habits are not just like weird and wacky, but it's actually what makes you a creative person every single day so that you can come into work and do that great work. All right, so we're nearly at the end, and I still haven't told you what's up with the animals. Are you guys wondering what's up with the animals? Yeah, you're wondering, yeah. So in 2011, I sketched this little guy for fun, and I really had a lot of fun doing it. And then later on, owls, right, I got to hold Duster, who's this like amazing African spotted eagle owl. He was 12 years old when I held him, so he was a pretty old dude. I really hope he's still alive. And then I got this magic pen, I call it. It's a Wacom Inkling that records pen strokes to vector, which is pretty neat. And I needed a project to motivate me to help learn how to use it, right? Because it's kind of a different method of drawing. So when I was applying to speak at JSConf, I knew that I wanted to talk about Maker's Block. I knew that I wanted to tell this story and share it with the community. But I also knew that I needed to get energy from somewhere to do it. I needed an action to get the motivation rolling. And I also needed some kind of unusual element for personal serendipity. And I needed to do something different, which is why sometimes you need to draw animals. Thank you very much.